There's many kind of blues forms. Of course, a 12-bar is the most common. The second most common is going to be an 8-bar blues. Now, the earliest 8-bar blues I was aware of was Key to the Highway. And this is a little different than that one. This is like Someday After a While You'll Be Sorry, the old, I think it's Freddie King who wrote that one, but lots of people did it, John Mayall and the Blues Breakers. B.B. King has a tune called I'll Survive. Once you hear it, you know this sound. And the big thing about it is a 1-6-2-5-1 turnaround and the addition of a sharp 4 diminished 7th chord. Okay, so first thing we have a G major to a G7. It's really nice in this particular tune. It's very common for those songs that I mentioned, Someday After a While and I'll Survive by B.B. King and any other tune that sounds like this. So I have G major. I'm going to play our old standard old G major triad. Right, then we go to a G7, so it adds a little more flavor at that point. So we hear like 1, 2, 3, 4, and so basically I just switched this. I could do a number of things. I could just play G7, put my pinky here. But if you notice throughout most of these chords, I don't really play too many low strings because it just gets in the way. I'm thinking about how I'm accompanying the musicians. I have a bass player. Ideally, I would have a singer. So, all right, so I have G7 here. So I'm playing G, B, F, and G on top. Okay, so G7, G major, to G7. So we have our 4 chord, which is C major. I can play our standard old C bar chord, but oftentimes I'll just drop that root, have that little voicing that's on the D, G, and B string. Next chord is going to be C sharp diminished 7. So there's a few things we're going to check out. That's the first one I did. And if you just want to learn that voicing, of course, it's in the PDF and everything. But think of it as a C7 chord, but with a sharped root. So if you do play the full C7 chord, we're going to move that up just by that half step. So it's pretty cool as you get deeper into the theory of diminished and things like that and how to use it. I was thinking of it as a dominant 7th chord with a sharp root, but that's for another course. Okay, now, really fascinating thing about a diminished 7th chord is each note can be the root. All the notes are equidistant apart. So a diminished 7th chord is spelled root, flat 3, flat 5, double flat 7. And what that gives us is every note is a minor third away from each other. So 1.5 steps. Heard that sound. So what I did was slide the chord up by 1 1/2 steps. On this particular version, this first time through. All right, so if you look at the notes, C sharp, G, B flat, E. I'm going to move that up. Here's my E, there's my B flat, there's my C sharp or D flat. I'm sorry, no, there's my E, excuse me, my B flat, my C sharp or D flat, however you want to see it, and a G. So I can move this up. As we see in the next chorus too, it's like that tied to the train tracks. Okay, so I moved that up because it gives, first of all, the chord progression, it's nice. It's a nice kind of sound. And if we move up the chord, it adds more immediacy to back to this G7 chord, bringing it back to the 1. So you've got this cool, right? So you're hearing this really nice. So this bass line. Okay, so it brings us back to this G7 chord. Okay, so 1-6-2-5-1. Well, what is that? Well, I'm in the key of G. So G is 1. G, A, B, C, D. E is 6. G, A is 2. And then 5 is D. So I'm doing a 1-6-2-5-1. So the chords would be G7, first time around, E7, A7, D7, G7. You want to memorize that. What does a 1-6-2-5-1 look like on the guitar? You know, it's really kind of old school too, like I got rhythm, things like that, based off of the 1-6-2-5-1. You come across it all the time. Now, one thing to point out, in a jazzier situation, very often your 2 chord is minor. Some most traditional blues feel like the 2 chord is a dominant 7. So I'll play as a minor. minor 7. So it'd be G7, E7, A minor 7, D7, back to the G. So it's a little softer sounding, so dominant. And minor. A little jazzier, right? That's kind of the way I look at it. Okay, so I'm going to kind of, if you notice, I played it differently 3 times through. So they played the G and the C stuff basically the same. So the next time through the song, through the chorus, I did a little bit different on my diminished 7. So let's take it from that 4 chord. Well, G, G7, C. Then I went to C sharp diminished 7th on the top 4 strings just to get that other voicing in. So I have the E. Here's my my B flat or A sharp. There's my C sharp and a G. Now, when you get into diminished chords, it gets a little tricky what you call certain things. Like, you usually don't mix sharps and flats, but I mean, technically, at music school, they would have gotten on me for that. But guitar players, sometimes we see things as a B flat as opposed to an A sharp. We just think in certain ways. So there's the voicing. And remember I said you slide up in minor thirds. Okay, so I just chose a different one, so it's a little higher, a little later in the song. It sounds kind of nice to not do everything the same exact way each time. Okay, so the first 1, 6, 2, 5, 1 I did were all just dominant 7th chords, right? So it was just kind of old school sounding, but essential as well. Oh, and by the way, you want to learn those 1, 6, 2, 5, 1s in different positions, right? So I'm, G, right, and different registers on the guitar. All right, so second time through, I made them 9th chords. So we have our charts and things I explained on how you form these 9th chords and the 13th chords. So I use 9s and 13s. So first thing I had to start with my just G7 and a G7 voicing I want. And then I went up to E9. There's my 6, but as a 9th chord, I had his E7 first. I'm going to make it E9. It's a little prettier. Then I went to, A13. Okay? So, and then I went to D9, and I could have kept that 13 on the top. So, then to the G. So I know when I played it this way. I went, okay, that's what I played on there. So I'm going to show you 2 things that we could have done. But that's nice because we have this melody on the top, right? It's not just, which also has my A7. So if we look at that 1, 6, 2, 5, the first one I did, I have a melody on the top there too. On my second string. That's pretty. So now the second time through, I played G7 to E9 to A13 with a 9 on top. So that B is on the top. Then I went to D9 to the A. And where does I want to go? Yeah. So I had this cool, pretty. Okay, now if I wanted it to be a little cooler, or just different, I could have kept the B on top. So watch. There's a G right here, a G major triad, or back down to this. That has a nice resolution going down. I could end it on G13, a little more jazzy. But you really want to experiment with these things, and it's really pretty. Now, say if I didn't play the melody in the high string. So other things to experiment with. I could spend hours talking about this, but once you start thinking about melody notes on top, I think it'll kind of really change your playing around. All right, so the third time through, throwing a kitchen sink at you here, I went to altered tensions on my 1, 6, 2, 5, 1. So it's the most jazzy, and we're going to see this again in the final study of the jazz blues. And I let's just run through what I played first. So I have G7. I went to E7, sharp 9, flat 13. the Hendrix chord with the pinky flattened out. Then I went to that A13 to D7, sharp 9, flat 13, then to G7. Okay, now, once again, G7, E7, sharp 9, flat 13. Don't forget, these big names are just chord fingerings for us right now, or if you're just getting into it, it's just a name. You know, there's no difference in me calling this like Fred or something. It's E7, sharp 9, flat 13. It tells you exactly what's in the chord, but don't let the long name scare you. It's just a chord, right? So once I kind of got past the fear of the name and started memorizing some of these shapes until they really start to sink in where your sharp 9s and flat 13s are and what they are, just memorize the charts that I've given you. It's really easy, actually. Okay, now, if you look, I'm just going to play those top 4 notes. I'm going to bring it down a half step. There's my A13, right? Same fingering. Now I'm going to go down a half step for D7, sharp 9, flat 13. So I have this really awesome, check it out. Pretty cool, right? So by moving this fingering, I get my 6 dominant 7 sharp 9 and altered 6. My 2 is natural tension of 9 13. Flat 9, sharp 9 flat 13, altered tensions again on the 4 chord. On the 5 chord, then back to the 1. So once again, pretty hip, right? How this works. So that might take a little while stylistically to get under your fingers or fingering-wise. Stylistically, it's super important to do the right one. You know, if you're playing, and it's a very old school traditional jazz sound, blues thing, and you throw in, it might be a little out of place. So one is not necessarily better than the other. It all comes down to stylistically and fitting into the style of blues that you're playing. It's a little more jazzy, totally go for it. The fun thing you could do too, if the rest of the guys in your band can hang, is if you start throwing that stuff in, they might kind of follow along with you. But I like both. It all depends on what the song calls for.